Arthur Volkov sat behind a desk of polished obsidian, a slab of night in a room of glass and steel. The city sprawled below him. A tapestry of light and shadow, of ambition and despair. His city. Across the desk, two men in expensive suits sweated. They thought they were hiding it well. They were wrong. Arthur saw everything in this room. The subtle tremor in a hand reaching for a glass of water. The darting eyes that avoided his own. The faint sheen of perspiration on a tailored collar. Fear was a currency, and Arthur Volkov was the richest man in the city. He did not speak. He simply listened. He let the silence do the work. Silence was his most effective tool, a hammer that could shatter composure and break wills. Marcus, his lieutenant, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. Immovable. Unreadable. A part of the office's formidable architecture. Finally, the older of the two men, a portly developer named Sterling, cleared his throat. The sound was a pathetic crack in the oppressive quiet. "Mr. Volkov," he began, his voice strained. "We just need a little more time. The permits are complicated." Arthur's eyes, the color of faded slate, remained fixed on him. They did not blink. He knew about the permits. He knew they were not complicated. He knew Sterling and his partner were trying to cut him out of a Docklands deal. A deal he had brokered. A deal he had guaranteed. A very foolish mistake. He finally leaned forward, just an inch, but the effect was monumental. The men flinched. "Time," Arthur said. His voice was low, gravelly. The sound of stones grinding together. "Time is something you have run out of. My investment was a guarantee of smoothness. Of speed. You have provided neither." He gestured to Marcus with a slight tilt of his head. Marcus stepped forward, placing a single, pristine folder on the desk. He slid it across the obsidian surface. It stopped perfectly before the two men. "You will sign over your shares to my holding company," Arthur stated. It was not a request. "You will walk away. You will forget the Docklands. You will forget this meeting. You will forget my name. In return, you will continue to breathe." Their faces went from pale to ashen. The deal was worth a fortune. But their lives were worth more. They understood. They signed. Their hands trembled so badly the signatures were nearly illegible. Marcus escorted them out, his presence a silent threat that promised dire consequences if they ever spoke of this. The door clicked shut. Silence returned. A comfortable silence this time. Arthur stared out at the city again. Another problem solved. Another piece of his empire secured. It was all so predictable. Greed. Betrayal. Fear. The three pillars of his world. Then, a sound. A sound that did not belong. The heavy office door creaked open. Slowly. Hesitantly. It was not Marcus returning. A small, stooped woman stood in the doorway. She wore a simple blue smock over a faded dress. Her hair was a cloud of white, pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands, wrinkled and chapped, clutched the handle of a yellow cleaning cart as if it were a shield. Elena. She had cleaned his office every night for 10 years. A ghost. A fixture. He knew her name, of course. He made it a point to know the name of everyone who worked in his building. But they had never spoken. Not a single word in a decade. Theirs was a silent, ritualistic contract. She would arrive at 10. She would clean around him while he worked late. She would be gone by midnight. She was efficient, invisible, and left behind only the faint, clean scent of lemon polish. Tonight, she was not invisible. She stood in the center of the doorway, framed by the light of the hallway, and she was trembling. Her face, usually a placid mask of quiet dignity, was a mess of tear tracks. Her eyes, red-rimmed and wide with a terror that dwarfed the fear he had just witnessed from the two developers, were fixed on him. Marcus appeared behind her instantly, his hand moving to her arm. You can't be in here. Mr. Volkov is busy. No, Elena whispered, her voice a dry rasp. She took a shuffling step into the room. Away from Marcus. Towards the desk. Please. Arthur raised his hand. One finger. It was enough. Marcus froze, his hand hovering in the air. He was confused. This was a breach of every protocol. No one entered this office uninvited. No one. Arthur studied the woman. He had seen her empty his trash, dust his shelves, polish his desk 1,000 times. But he had never truly looked at her. He saw her now. He saw the worn-out shoes. The mended tear in her smock. The profound, soul-deep exhaustion in her posture. What is it? He asked. His voice was softer than before, but it still held an edge of command. She shuffled forward, her gaze dropping to the immaculate floor. She seemed to be gathering every ounce of courage she possessed. Mr. Volkov, she began, her voice cracking. They say, people in the building, they say you help people. When no one else will. He remained silent, letting her speak. She reached into the pocket of her smock and pulled out a small, crumpled ball of cash. She flattened it on the edge of his desk with a shaking hand. It was a pathetic collection of 5s, 10s, and 20s. A few $100s at most. I want to hire you, she whispered, the words barely audible. Her eyes finally met his. They were filled with a desperate, heartbreaking plea. My grandson, she choked out. My Leo. He's sick. The hospital, they say it's his lungs. From the apartment. The mold. The cold. A tear escaped and traced a new path down her wrinkled cheek. The landlord, he won't fix anything. He wants us out. All of us. He wants to tear it down, she gestured vaguely with her hand, as if indicating some far-off, wretched place. He cut the heat. The water comes and goes. Now my Leo, my boy, he's in the hospital. Fighting. She pushed the small pile of money an inch closer to him. This is everything I have, she said. Please. They say you make problems go away. I have a problem. Arthur Volkov, the man who moved millions with a single phone call, who had just acquired a multi-million-dollar property for the price of 2 men's fear, stared at the crumpled bills. He looked at the old woman's desperate face. And for the first time in a very, very long time, he felt something other than cold control. He felt a tremor. A crack in the foundation of his world. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next is a testament to the fact that even in the darkest corners of the world, a single act of kindness can change everything. You are not going to want to miss the conclusion to this story. If you're enjoying this tale, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter. Let us know where you are watching from in the comments below. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's get back to it. Arthur Volkov was not a man given to sentiment. Sentiment was a weakness. A liability. His life had been a brutal exercise in excising such vulnerabilities. He was born in the forgotten, crumbling tenements of a borough the city had long since given up on. A place of rust and ruin, where the only law was strength and the only currency was survival. He remembered the cold. It was a memory that lived in his bones. The kind of damp, biting cold that seeped through thin walls and threadbare blankets. He remembered his mother, a woman with Elena's same tired eyes and work-worn hands, coughing into a handkerchief by the faint light of a single, flickering bulb. He remembered the smell of mildew, the taste of stale bread, and the constant, gnawing feeling of helplessness. That helplessness had forged him. It had been the fire that burned away the boy and left the man. A man who vowed he would never be cold or helpless again. A man who would control his environment so completely that no outside force could ever touch him. He had succeeded. He had built an empire not of brick and mortar, though he owned plenty of that, but of influence and fear. His name was spoken in whispers in boardrooms and back alleys. He was a myth. A boogeyman to some, a savior to others. He had a code, an old-world set of principles that the new breed of criminals found quaint. His word was his bond. He did not harm women or children. He did not betray his own. Those who broke his code, or the simple codes of human decency, were dealt with. Swiftly. Permanently. His world was violent and illegal, but it had structure. It had rules. Men like Julian Croft, the landlord Elena spoke of, operated in a world Arthur despised. The world of legal cruelty. Men who used contracts and lawyers as weapons to hurt the defenseless. They were leeches in fine suits, protected by a system Arthur had long ago chosen to operate outside of. They had no honor. No code. Only greed. He looked at Elena, who still stood before him, her hope fading with every second of his silence. He had seen her for a decade, a silent witness to his late-night dealings. She had seen men like Sterling leave his office, their faces pale with fear. She had cleaned up spilled coffee and, on one occasion, a few drops of blood. She had never said a word. She had kept her head down and her world separate. Until now. Her world had collided with his. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. The one the terrified developers had just vacated. "Sit, Elena." She flinched, as if the invitation itself was a shock. She had never sat in this office. She had only ever cleaned it. Hesitantly, she perched on the very edge of the plush leather chair, her back ramrod straight. She looked tiny and out of place, a sparrow in an eagle's nest. "Tell me about your grandson," Arthur said. His voice was quiet, encouraging. Her face softened at the mention of the boy's name. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Leo," she said. "He is 7. He is my world. His parents, they were lost in a car accident 3 years ago. It has just been us since then." She reached into her smock again, her hands less shaky this time. She pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, she produced a creased, dog-eared photograph. She slid it across the desk. Arthur picked it up. A boy with a gaped grin and bright, mischievous eyes stared back at him. He was wearing a homemade superhero cape, a red towel tied around his neck, and holding a plastic sword. He was the picture of innocent, boundless joy. "He loves to draw," Elena continued, her voice filled with a grandmother's pride. "He draws heroes. Men who save people. He says he will be an architect when he grows up, to build warm houses for everyone." The words hung in the air. To build warm houses. "And this landlord," Arthur prompted gently. "Croft." Elena's face hardened. "Julian Croft. He bought our building 6 months ago. The old owner, Mr. Henderson, he was a good man. He kept the rents low. He knew we were all working families. But he passed away, and his children sold it." She described the change. How the polite notices about new management turned into threats. How the rent was doubled overnight, an impossible sum for most. How the maintenance requests were ignored. First, it was small things. A leaky faucet. A broken lock. Then, bigger things. The boiler broke in November and was never fixed. The water became intermittent. The garbage pickup, sporadic. "He is trying to smoke us out," she said, her voice trembling with a quiet rage. "Most have left. Took his miserable buyout money because they had children and could not stay in the cold. But some of us, we have nowhere to go. This is our home." She told him about the black mold. It started in the basement and crept up the walls like a disease. The smell was everywhere. The children were always coughing. Little Leo, more than anyone. His teacher had called, concerned about his constant fatigue. Then the fever started. "I took him to the clinic," she said, her voice breaking again. "They said it was a bad cold. But he got worse. Last night, he couldn't breathe. I called the ambulance. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. The doctor at the hospital said it is severe pneumonia. That the mold, it has gotten into his lungs. He is on a machine to help him breathe. She looked up, her eyes pleading. Mr. Croft knows. I have called his office 100 times. I have sent letters. Yesterday, his manager told me that if I did not like the conditions, I was free to leave. He said the apartment would be vacant by the 1st of the month one way or another. Arthur placed the photograph of Leo gently on the desk. He saw it all. The systemic cruelty. The calculated neglect. A man in a high-rise tower, just like this one, destroying lives for profit. A man who saw people like Elena and Leo not as human beings, but as obstacles on a balance sheet. He looked at the crumpled money again. Her life savings. An insult to him in any other context. A pittance. But tonight, it was the most valuable currency he had ever been offered. It was a payment of pure, unadulterated faith. A grandmother's last, desperate gamble on a myth. On him. The city outside was a predator. A cold, indifferent machine. Julian Croft was one of its gears. A man who thrived on the suffering of the powerless. The system protected him. The law was his shield. But Arthur Volkov was not part of that system. He was the rock upon which that system broke. He thought of his mother, wasting away in a cold room. He thought of the promise he had made to her memory, that he would become strong enough so that no one he cared about would ever feel that helpless again. He had kept that promise to his own family, to his organization. But his circle of care was small and tightly guarded. Elena was not in that circle. She was a cleaning woman. An employee. A ghost. But her grandson, that boy with the superhero cape and the gap-toothed grin, he was a child. And Arthur's code was absolute on that point. The innocent were not to be touched. They were to be protected. He had built a fortress of power and wealth around himself, a fortress designed to keep the world out. Tonight, a 70-year-old cleaning woman with a sick grandson had walked right through the gates. She had not used force or cunning. She had used the simple, devastating power of a righteous plea. He felt the old, familiar coldness settle over him. Not the cold of indifference, but the cold of purpose. The cold he felt before he passed a sentence. Before he corrected an imbalance in his world. Julian Croft had created an imbalance. He had broken a rule far older and more important than any city ordinance or contractual law. He had harmed a child through his greed. And for that, there had to be a reckoning. Arthur reached across the desk. His hand, large and scarred from a life of struggle, dwarfed Elena's. He did not push the money back to her. Instead, he carefully gathered the crumpled bills. He smoothed them out, one by one. He folded the small stack neatly in half and tucked it into the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket, beside a silk pocket square. The gesture was deliberate. Reverent. "I accept your payment, Elena," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "The job is mine now. You will not speak to Mr. Croft or his people again. You will not call them. You will focus on Leo. Do you understand?" A wave of emotions washed over her face. Shock. Disbelief. And then, a dawning, fragile hope that was so powerful it seemed to physically lift her. The tension in her shoulders eased. The terror in her eyes receded, replaced by a flood of tears. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of relief. "Yes," she whispered, nodding. "Yes, Mr. Volkov. Thank you. Go to the hospital," he commanded gently. "Be with your grandson. Do not leave his side." She stood, her legs unsteady. She gave him a small, formal nod, the kind an employee gives a boss, but her eyes conveyed a depth of gratitude that words could never capture. She turned and walked out of the office, Marcus holding the door for her. This time, he looked at her with a newfound respect. The door closed, and Arthur was alone again. For a long moment, he simply stared at the photograph of the boy in the red towel cape. A hero. The boy believed in heroes. A foolish, childish notion. Arthur knew the world had no heroes. It only had monsters. And sometimes, it took one monster to hunt another. He picked up the secure phone on his desk, the one that made untraceable calls. He pressed a single button. "Marcus," he said, his voice now stripped of all warmth. It was pure, cold steel. "Get the car. We are leaving." He paused. "And get me everything on a man named Julian Croft. Everything. His business dealings, his partners, his home address, his security. I want to know where he sleeps, what he eats, who he sees. I want to know every secret he has. I want to own him before the sun comes up." He hung up and made a second call. This one to a private number. "Dr. Alpert," he said. "Arthur," a calm voice replied on the other end. "It's late. Is everything all right? I need you at City General Hospital. Pediatric intensive care. There is a boy. His name is Leo. Last name is..." He paused, realizing he didn't know it. It didn't matter. "Find him. He has pneumonia from mold exposure. I want him to have the best care. The best specialists. A private room. Whatever it takes. Send all the bills to me. Consider it done, Arthur." And, "Doctor," Arthur added. "Make sure the boy lives." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "I will do everything in my power." Arthur hung up the phone. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the river of headlights flowing through the city's concrete canyons. Down there, in a warm, sterile hospital room, a boy was fighting for his life. And somewhere else, in a luxurious penthouse, a man named Julian Croft was sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware that his world was about to end. Arthur Volkov had accepted a job. And he always finished his work. Marcus returned less than an hour later. The speed was a testament to his efficiency and the reach of Arthur's network. He carried a tablet, its screen glowing in the dim office. "Julian Croft," Marcus began, his voice all business. 38 years old. Inherited his father's real estate company, Croft Properties. His leverage to the hilt. Buying up old tenant buildings in gentrifying neighborhoods, forcing residents out, and flipping them for luxury condos. It's his signature move. He's facing a dozen lawsuits, but his lawyers are good at tying things up in court for years. Arthur listened, his expression unchanging. This was the filth he expected. His arrogant, Marcus continued, swiping through pages of data. Careless. Doesn't believe the rules apply to him. Lives in the Azure Tower penthouse. State-of-the-art security, but the codes are changed on a predictable schedule. We have the current one. He has a weakness for high-stakes poker. There's an unsanctioned game he attends every Tuesday night in the back room of a club called Belysium. He usually leaves around 2 in the morning, heavily intoxicated. Arthur glanced at the clock on his wall. It was 1:30 a.m. Tuesday. Perfect. He is not a man of any importance, Marcus concluded. No connections to our world. He is a civilian predator. A shark that swims in shallow water. He hurt a child, Arthur said quietly, as if that was the only line in the entire report that mattered. That makes him our business. Marcus nodded. He understood the boss's code. He had seen it enforced before. But this was different. Usually, it was a matter of business, of territory, of respect. This was personal. For a woman who cleaned the floors. He did not question it. He simply prepared to execute the orders he knew were coming. The plan is simple, Arthur said, turning from the window. We are not going to ruin his business. That is too slow, too impersonal. We are not going to his office. This is not a business meeting. He looked directly at Marcus. We are going to his home. He wanted Croft to feel it. The violation. The helplessness. The terror of having his sanctuary invaded by forces he could not comprehend or control. He wanted him to feel, if only for a few minutes, what the families in his buildings felt every single day. "Just the two of us," Arthur commanded. "No noise. No trace. We will be ghosts, just like Elena." The Azure Tower was a monument to new money. A gleaming spire of glass and chrome that scraped the sky. Arthur and Marcus bypassed the doorman and the concierge with practiced ease, using a service elevator accessed with a code Marcus had acquired minutes earlier. They moved with a silent, synchronized grace that spoke of years of practice. They rode up to the penthouse in silence. The air in the small elevator was thick with unspoken purpose. The apartment door was a heavy slab of steel. Marcus entered the code into the electronic keypad. A soft green light blinked. A quiet click. The lock disengaged. They stepped inside. The apartment was sterile. Cold. White marble floors, white leather furniture, abstract art on the walls that was loud in color but empty of soul. The entire western wall was a single pane of glass, offering a spectacular view of the city, a view almost as good as Arthur's own. It was the home of a man who loved things, not people. Arthur walked through the cavernous living room. He ran a hand along the back of a solar sofa. He looked at the expensive, untouched books on the shelves. He felt nothing but contempt. This was not a home. It was a showroom. A display case for a man's ego. He made his way to the bar and stood behind it. Marcus moved to the light switch, his hand resting on it, waiting. They waited in the dark. The silence stretched. It was a patient, predatory silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the city far below. At 2:47 a.m., they heard the telltale beep of the keypad at the door. The door opened, then closed with a heavy thud. Footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Stumbling, unsteady footsteps. A man grumbled to himself, tossing his keys onto a glass table with a clatter. Julian Croft walked into the living room, loosening his tie. Even in the dim light filtering through the window, they could see the arrogant swagger in his walk, the smug satisfaction on his face. He had likely won at cards. He felt like the king of the world. He reached for a lamp. Before his fingers could touch the switch, Marcus acted. Click! The overhead lights flooded the room, clinically bright and unforgiving. Julian Croft froze, blinking in the sudden glare. His eyes struggled to adjust. When they did, they widened in shock and terror. He saw Marcus by the door, a large, imposing figure blocking his only exit. And he saw Arthur, standing behind his bar, calmly pouring 2 glasses of water. Croft's drunken arrogance evaporated like mist in the sun. Fear, primal and raw, took its place. His face went slack. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. "Mr. Croft," Arthur said, his voice calm, conversational. He pushed one of the glasses of water across the bar. "You look like you could use this." Croft didn't move. He stared, paralyzed. Who are you? What do you want?" "I'll give you money." "Anything." "I am not here for your money," Arthur said. He took a slow sip from his own glass. "I am here because of a payment I have already accepted. A very small payment, for a very important job." He walked around the bar and approached Croft, stopping a few feet away. He was shorter than the younger man, but his presence seemed to fill the room, to suck the very air from it. "I am here to talk to you about your building on Elm Street," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I am here to talk about the boiler. The water pipes. The black mold." A flicker of recognition, then defiance, appeared in Croft's eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about. That's a civil matter. My lawyers." "Do not speak of your lawyers," Arthur interrupted, his voice cutting like a shard of glass. "They cannot help you here. This is not a courtroom. This is a reckoning." Arthur reached into his suit jacket. Croft flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, Arthur pulled out a folded, creased piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a child's drawing, done in bright, cheerful crayons. A lopsided sun, a crooked house, and a stick figure of a superhero with a red cape. He held it up for Croft to see. "His name is Leo," Arthur said softly. "He is 7 years old. He likes to draw pictures of heroes. He wants to be an architect so he can build warm houses for people." Arthur's eyes, cold and hard as diamonds, bored into Croft. Right now, Leo is in a hospital bed, in an oxygen tent, with pneumonia. His lungs are filled with fluid and spores. The doctors are fighting to save his life. They are fighting because you wanted to save a few $1,000s on heating and plumbing. Because you saw him, and his grandmother, and all the other families in that building, as nothing more than pests to be smoked out of your investment. He took a step closer. Croft stumbled backward, hitting the edge of a chair. "You live here," Arthur said, gesturing around the opulent, sterile room. "In this palace of glass, breathing filtered air, drinking bottled water. And that boy is choking on the air in a home you are legally obligated to maintain. You have a word for that in your world. It's called business strategy. In my world, we have a different word for it." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Dishonorable." Croft was shaking now, sweat beading on his forehead. "Listen, I can fix it. I'll get a crew out there tomorrow. I'll move the boy's family to a hotel." "No," Arthur said flatly. "You will not. Your time for fixing things is over. Now, you will listen." Marcus stepped forward, placing a briefcase on the glass coffee table. He opened it. It was filled with legal documents. "This is a deed transfer," Arthur explained calmly. "You are going to sign over ownership of the Elm Street building. Not to me. To a trust that has been established in the names of the tenants who live there. They will own their homes. Free and clear." He continued, his voice relentless. "You will also sign this cashier's check, drawn from your personal account, for $500,000. It will be deposited into the trust to pay for a complete renovation of the building. New plumbing, new heating, new windows, and a full, professional remediation of the mold you allowed to fester." Croft stared at the papers, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. "That's insane. That building is it's everything." "No," Arthur corrected him. "It was a line item on your ledger. To them, it is their home. To a little boy, it is the place he is supposed to feel safe. You took that from him. Now, you will give it back." Marcus produced a pen and held it out. Croft looked from the papers to Arthur's unyielding face. He saw no room for negotiation. No glimmer of mercy. He saw only the finality of a judgment that had already been passed. His empire of legal loopholes and contractual cruelty had run into a law far more ancient and absolute. "And what happens after I sign?" Croft whispered, his voice hoarse. "After you sign," Arthur said, his voice dropping even lower, "you will pack a bag. You will walk out of this building. You will get in your car and you will drive away from this city. You will not contact your office. You will not speak to your friends or associates. You will simply disappear. If I ever hear your name in this city again, if you ever try to do this to anyone else, anywhere, Marcus will find you. And your problem will be permanently resolved." The threat was unspoken but perfectly clear. With a trembling hand, Julian Croft took the pen. He signed every document. His signature was a jagged, terrified scrawl. When he was done, he slumped back, a broken man. Arthur picked up the signed papers and the check. He handed them to Marcus, who placed them back in the briefcase. Arthur turned to leave. He stopped at the door and looked back at the pathetic figure of Julian Croft. "You are a very wealthy man," Arthur said. "But you are poor in the only things that matter. Honor. Decency. Humanity." He left the drawing of the superhero on the coffee table. Maybe keep this, he said. To remind you of the cost of doing business. Then he and Marcus walked out, closing the door softly behind them, leaving Julian Croft alone in the ruins of his life. The problem, as Elena had requested, was gone. Arthur did not go home. He had Marcus drive him to the hospital. The hallways were quiet at this hour, smelling of antiseptic and quiet suffering. He did not go to the pediatric floor. He did not want to be seen. He stood in the shadows of a waiting area at the far end of a corridor, from which he had a clear view of the nurse's station and the entrance to the ICU. He waited. Just before dawn, he saw Dr. Alpert emerge, speaking with a nurse. A few minutes later, he saw Elena being led gently out of the ICU waiting room. The doctor spoke to her, his hand on her shoulder. Arthur was too far away to hear the words, but he could see the expression on Elena's face. He watched as her posture, so stooped with worry, seemed to straighten. He watched as she covered her mouth, her eyes closing in a prayer of thanks. He saw the doctor give her a reassuring nod before a nurse led her down another hallway, presumably to the new private room he had arranged. Leah would live. The news settled into Arthur's soul, a quiet, unfamiliar warmth. It was the feeling of a job well done. Not a business deal closed, or a rival crushed, but something more. Something clean. The papers are filed, Marcus said, appearing silently at his side. The trust is active. The money has been transferred. Croft is gone. His car was last seen heading west on the interstate, and he has not used his phone or credit card since. Arthur nodded, his eyes still on the empty hallway where Elena had been. Good. They stood in silence for a moment. That was not for business, boss, Marcus stated. It was not a question. No, Arthur agreed. It was not. Marcus hesitated, a rare thing for him. That money she gave you, what do you want me to do with it? Leave it, Arthur said. It is where it belongs. The next evening, at precisely 10 o'clock, the door to Arthur's office opened. Elena entered. She was not wearing her blue cleaning smock. She wore a simple but neat black dress. She looked rested. The deep lines of worry on her face had softened. She carried no cleaning cart. She walked to his desk and stood before him, not as an employee, but as an equal. The doctor told me, she began, her voice clear and strong. He said an anonymous benefactor arranged for everything. For the specialists, the private room. He said Leo is going to make a full recovery. Arthur simply inclined his head. And this morning, she continued, a look of wonder in her eyes, a lawyer came to the hospital. He met with all the remaining tenants. He told us we own the building now. That there is money, more than enough money, to fix everything. She paused, her gaze steady on his. The building manager said Mr. Croft has resigned. That he has left the country. He had urgent business elsewhere, Arthur said, his tone flat. Elena fell silent for a moment, processing the enormity of it all. She knew. She didn't know the details, but she knew it was him. I came to thank you, she said. And to resign. I cannot clean your floors anymore. It would not feel right. I understand, he said. She opened her small purse. The lawyer, he gave me an advance from the trust. For expenses, she pulled out a thick envelope of cash and placed it on his desk. I want to pay you properly. What you did, it was worth more than everything. But this is a start. Arthur looked at the envelope, then back at her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small, crumpled wad of bills she had given him the night before. He held it out to her in his open palm. You overpaid, he said simply. Elena looked at the money in his hand, the money that had represented her entire life savings, and she shook her head. She gently pushed his hand away. No, she said softly. That was for my grandson's life. It was the best money I ever spent. Please. Keep it. To remember that good things can be bought with it, too. He looked at her, then closed his hand around the bills and put them back in his pocket. He would keep them. Elena looked around the grand office, at the man who commanded so much power from behind this desk. Her expression was one of genuine, heartfelt curiosity. "Mr. Volkov," she asked, her voice free of fear. "Are you a good man?" The question was direct. Simple. And utterly profound. No one had ever dared to ask him such a thing. He was feared, he was respected, he was obeyed. But good? The word was alien in his world. It was a concept for priests and children. Arthur turned his chair slightly and looked out the window at the city lights. A million stories, a million struggles. A world of grey, not black and white. "I am what this city requires me to be," he answered, his voice a low murmur. He turned back to her, and his slate-grey eyes held a flicker of something she had not seen before. Something almost like peace. "Tonight," he said. "Because of you, and because of a boy who draws heroes. I was." He opened a drawer in his desk and took out a single, stark white business card. It was thick, expensive cardstock, but it was completely blank except for a phone number etched in black ink. He slid it across the desk to her. "This is my private number," he said. "If you, or that boy, or anyone in that building ever needs anything again, you call this number. The protection is permanent." Elena picked up the card and held it as if it were a precious jewel. She gave him a final, grateful nod. "God bless you, Mr. Volkov." She turned and left, closing the door quietly behind her, leaving him alone in the silence of his empire. Years passed. The city churned on, ever-changing, ever-devouring. Skylines shifted. Fortunes were made and lost. Men like Arthur Volkov grew older, their legends fading into the stuff of myth as a new, more chaotic generation took their place. But on a quiet, tree-lined block on Elm Street, one thing did not change. The building stood, not as a monument to greed, but as a testament to community. It was fully renovated, clean, and warm. The tenants, now the owners, had formed a co-op. They looked out for one another. Children played in the small, well-tended garden out back where a dumpster used to be. It was an island of stability and hope in the turbulent sea of the city. Leo grew up. The sickness had left no lasting mark on him, except in his resolve. He grew into a bright, determined young man. He never forgot the cold, or the fear, or the feeling of fighting for breath. He excelled in school, earned a scholarship, and, just as he had promised his grandmother, he became an architect. He didn't design gleaming skyscrapers for the wealthy. He dedicated his career to creating innovative, sustainable, and affordable housing. He built homes for people who needed them, homes that were safe and warm. He became the hero he used to draw. Arthur Volkov watched from a distance. Through quiet inquiries and anonymous reports from Marcus, he kept track of the boy. He saw photos of his high school graduation, his college acceptance letter, the groundbreaking of his first community housing project. He never interfered. He never made his presence known. He was a silent, unseen guardian, honoring a promise made years ago. In his magnificent office, high above the city, things remained largely the same. The obsidian desk was still immaculate. The view was still breathtaking. But there were two small changes. On a bookshelf behind his desk, nestled between leather-bound first editions, sat a small, inexpensive wooden frame. It was out of place amongst the opulent decor, but it was the most prized possession in the room. Inside the frame was a faded, crayon drawing of a superhero with a lopsided sun in the corner. And in the hidden safe behind a painting, amongst bearer bonds and deeds and stacks of currency, was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside the box, perfectly preserved, was a crumpled, worn-out collection of small bills. A payment. A reminder. A reminder of the night an old woman's desperation had given a jaded king a chance to perform a single, purely good act. The world is full of lines. Lines between legal and illegal, between right and wrong, between good and evil. For most of his life, Arthur Volkov had lived in the grey spaces between those lines, creating his own code where none existed. He understood that a man's character is not defined by his title or his wealth, but by his choices, especially the hard ones. He learned that true power was not the ability to take, but the ability to protect. And that sometimes, in a world full of monsters, the only thing that can save the innocent is another monster, guided by a flicker of light. For it is often in the deepest darkness that the smallest kindness shines the brightest, proving that the measure of any soul is not what it is, but what it chooses to become.